bother me a little too much, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it off, and I'll come down there so I can be a little bit louder. But my sister's told me many times, and so have my parents, I have a loud mouth, so it should be fine. So, I want to start this with a little bit of announcements. We got some good news and some bad news to share with you today. Before I get to that, I want to tell you a little bit of a joke to maybe calm your nerves. Did you hear about the guy who was called into the doctor's office? The doctor sat him down and said, I have some good news and I have some bad news. Which do you want to hear first? Well, the guy said, give me the good news first. Okay, the doctor said, your tests are back and they say you have 3 days to live. And the guy starts panicking. He's like, that's the good news. What could be the bad news? The doctor replies, well, my secretary's been trying to reach you for 2 days. So, I have some good news and I have some bad news. Well, our good news is that our church is like a family. Our bad news is that our church is like a family. 1 Timothy 3:15 says, I am writing, and breaks, so that you will know how people ought to conduct themselves in God's household, which is the church of the living God, the pillar, the foundation of the truth. That word household is the term that is used for family. So I have some more cute little stories here. Children were writing letters to God. And you can just imagine when children are writing letters to God, they say some pretty funny things. But here's a few of these ones. Dear God, it rained for a whole vacation. And is my father mad? He said some things about you people are not supposed to say. But I hope you will not hurt him anyway. Your friend, but I'm not going to tell you who I am. Dear God, is it true my father won't get in heaven if he uses his bowling words in the house? Dear God, maybe Cain and Abel would not kill each other so much if they had their own rooms. It works for my brother. And dear God, thank you for the baby brother, but what I prayed for was a puppy. Dear God, did you really mean do unto others as they do unto you? Because if you did, then I'm going to fix my brother. And dear God, I bet it's very hard for you to love everyone in the whole world. There are only 4 people in our family, and I can never do it. Some of these things, they sound familiar, and so much for the perfect family. And we are a family of believers. And there's more to family and to our family than weekly reunions. God has given us 5 purposes for this family. From the New Testament, we can pick out 5 things. Every commandment that God gives us kind of falls under these 5 categories. These categories are fellowship, discipleship, ministry, evangelism, and worship. And that would be a broad topic to cover for one sermon. We're going to focus on fellowship, on this week of our annual meeting, and as our church year is coming to a close, we want to talk about fellowship, about what our church is and what our family is here. So we're going to focus on Romans chapter 12, verses 9 through 21, as we talk about fellowshipping as believers. And in these verses that we're going to read, there's 10 commandments that we can pull out of this. Not the 10 commandments, but 10 commandments of fellowship that we can pull out of this text. 10 commandments for us as a family to kind of live out. So Romans 12, starting at verse 9. Love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, "It is mine to avenge, I will repay," says the Lord. On contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not overcome evil, but overcome evil with good. That's a lot to take in, but we're going to break it down. And from that first one, we get the first of these 10 commandments, as we're going to call them. And it's to love one another. And I think we do a pretty good job of doing that in our family. Love must be sincere, without hypocrisy. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. And the love that we're talking about is agape, and we hear so much about agape. What is agape love? It's unconditional, sacrificial love. It's like the love that Jesus had for us and what God has for us. It's what parents have for their children. It's what we're called to have for each other. There was one night we couldn't really get some of the kids in youth group couldn't get their head around this. The culture is just, the word love means so many other things in this culture. And there'd always be giggling when we say you gotta love one another. No, I don't want to love him. I don't want to love her. And we couldn't get around it, and we came up with the word. We called it, they didn't get agape love, and we made our own word. We called it bibla. Biblical love. So when we're talking about loving one another, we're talking about loving each other like a family. Because that's what we are. Not the angry older brother, not the annoying little sister, but like the parent loves the child. Unconditional love. No matter what happens between that relationship, that love can't be broken. That's the love that God has for us. And that's what our church family is supposed to have for one another. And that word, the root word for brotherly love, comes from, now bear with me on this one, Philostorgos and Philadelphos, Philadelphia, hence where it's the city of brotherly love. So that's where it comes from. And I'm going to use this one illustration that I found. Carol, a gracious clerk in a local Christian bookstore, often refers to the church as the body. One week, many devoted members of a local body had come to the bookstore to buy birthday gifts for their pastor. On Saturday, that Pastor John stopped at the store. He told Carol about the surprise party his congregation had given him the night before. Carol's heart was touched spontaneously. She was just so overwhelmed with the love that she saw for the church body, for the pastor. She leaned forward to the pastor and exclaimed, "Oh, John, I just love your body." We are the body of believers. We are one body. And we need to be that way. We need to be one body and love each other. Our bodies, our own individual bodies, do no good if we chopped off our hand. It affects our whole body. We need to love our whole body. We need to love everyone in this church. The second one is honor one another. And we get this from the verse 10. It says, honor one another above yourselves. That last part, honor one another is great, but the above yourselves calls us to do something a little bit more. honor one another. Give preference to one another in honor. Give preference over yourself. Literally, this command says, lead the way for others in honor. Lead the way for others in honor. And what the word honor means is something weighty, valuable, high esteem, dignity, and respect. That's how we're supposed to hold one another. As if it's some valuable, precious object that we have. Hold each other in that high esteem. Proverbs, which we started to talk about yesterday in our men's breakfast. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 33 says, the fear of the Lord teaches a man wisdom, and humility comes before honor. If we don't have humility, we can't have honor. We may think we have honor, we may be respecting someone to some extent, but without that humility of ourselves, we can't have honor. God's word commands us to honor and respect others. True fellowship means that we honor others. The third one we're going to be talking about today is worship with one another. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor. What that means, never lag behind or be slothful in diligence. Don't be slow to poke in your zeal. And keep your spiritual fever implies a burning desire to serve the Lord. Boiling in the spirit, as someone once said it. We need to have that passion as a body of believers. We need to have that family passion. It doesn't work if one of us has it. We all need to have that same passion together. That's often why you see so many churches that have, and why we have our mission statement. It's because we're one body. We're headed in one direction. We have one purpose. And that purpose is to serve God. We're worshiping together. We're serving the Lord with that passion. Worship draws us closer to God, but it also draws us closer together. Worship promotes fellowship. How can we best worship and serve the Lord? That's a question for you guys. And for us, for me. How can we best worship and serve the Lord? It's by being zealous for Him. By burning and having that boiling with desire inside of us. Being joyful in hope. True fellowship means that we worship together. The fourth one we get from verse 13. Be gracious to one another. Share with God's people who are in need. King James says, distributing to the necessity of saints. So share with God's people who are in need. We're always out there talking about wanting to share with those that are out there in the community that don't have anything, that have needs to fill. We're always looking to fill needs of people out in the community. We can't forget. We got to do that. We can't let that not be a focus of ours. But we also need to meet the needs of our family. We often see parents in a household. If they want to give to charities, if they want to help and devote their time to, say, a local food pantry, they're going to make sure first that they have enough time to put food on the table for their children. Maybe a food pantry is a bad example because they can provide the food. But the first thing for a parent's responsibility is they're going to provide for their children. They're going to provide for that family. We as a family, we need to provide for ourselves and fill the needs, because if we have needs, we're not going to be very good at fulfilling the needs of others in the community. We need to provide for each other's needs. This is a quote from Robert Shannon. He said, Christian fellowship is so unique, the first believers searched for a word to describe it. They found a solution in an old word no longer in use, like some of the ones my dad uses. They dusted off the word and used it. It's called, another word you're going to have to bear with me on, koinonia. Koinonia. They knew no ordinary word could describe the relationship that exists among believers. Practice hospitality. Friendliness to strangers. Pursue, chase after hospitality. They found it so important that they wanted to search for a word to describe it. It's something that the world doesn't know. It's something that revered, something that protected. We need to pursue it. We need to practice the hospitality. We need to fulfill the needs. You can't fulfill the needs if you don't know others' needs. Now, Paul goes beyond friendliness to the saints, to friendliness to strangers. We need to be gracious to one another, especially to those who join our fellowship. We have to be gracious to those that are here in our family, but we can't be such a tight-knit family that when someone new comes in, we don't welcome them with open arms. We need to pursue and fulfill their needs as well. We need to welcome them to a part of the family. Because before we get the chance to welcome to the family, God already has welcomed to the family. A church newsletter mentioned a man who visited 18 different churches on successive Sundays, trying to find out what the churches were really like. In every church, he was neatly dressed and followed the same routine for giving ample opportunity for fellowship. Then he used a scale to rate the reception he received. Tell where this one's headed. There are points he awarded. He awarded 10 points for a smile from a worshiper. He awarded 10 points for a greeting from someone sitting nearby. 100 for an exchange of names. 200 for an invitation to have coffee. 200 points for an invitation to simply return. 1,000 points for an introduction to another worshiper. 2,000 points for an invitation to meet the pastor. On this scale, 11 of the 18 churches earned fewer than 100 points. 5 actually received less than 20 points. 3 smiles from a worshiper would have gone above that 20. The conclusion that he came up with is that the doctrine may be biblical, the singing is inspirational, the sermon uplifting, but when a visitor finds nobody who cares whether he's here, he is not likely to come back. And I think we, and it's part of the culture that I love about up here, I think we do a pretty good job with that. But a pretty good job isn't enough. Is that our focus when we see somebody new in here? Do we make sure our focus is welcoming them to the family? Not pushing them out, but greeting them. Making them feel welcome. Making them feel like we're enjoying our time here. So many people come up to me and they tell me, "You go to church every Sunday?" Yeah. And they're like, "Oh, you mean everyone?" And it just strikes me, it's because their experiences that they've been in church isn't an excited one, isn't a happy one. It's not something that they want to do. They go on the specific days because they think they need to. Whether they need to appease God or whether they need to appease family, they feel going to church is something they have to do. A smile, an invitation to have coffee, an invitation to return to the service. Just something that simple could make them feel that, hey, we love being here as a family. We love worshiping together. We love fellowshipping together. You're invited. We want you to be a part of it. I don't know you. I want to get a chance to know you. Before I get to know you, though, you're already welcome into the family. True fellowship means being gracious to one another. Do not be spiteful towards one another. Verse 14, 17, 19, and 20. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, "It is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord." If your enemy is hungry, feed him. And this is a different translation. If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. John Whitmer describes what this verse is saying. The coals on the head may refer to a ritual in Egypt in which a person showed his repentance by carrying a pan of burning charcoals on his head. Helping rather than cursing an enemy may cause him to be ashamed and to penitent. I'm having a horrible time with words. But so that's where the burning coals on the head come from a ritual in Egypt. A pat on the back is only a few vertebrae removed from a kick in the pants. But the result is a lot different. The result that the person takes away is a lot different. When we're hurt by those around us, we want to hurt them back. We want to get revenge. We feel as if we have the right to be angry or bitter. But we don't have the right. But all that does is bring us more pain and more harm. It's like they get to hurt you twice. Bitterness is a cancer. You can try to put it in remission, but if you don't deal with it, it will come back to haunt you. If we're going to grow warmer through fellowship, we need to let God seek the revenge. Not push God towards that revenge. Not keep pointing out, hey God, by the way, don't forget about the revenge for this person over here. Well, God, don't forget what he did to me the other week. We don't need to seek that revenge. If revenge needs to be sought, God will seek it. But as a family of believers, do we want anything bad to happen to any one of us? We need to be doing the opposite. We need to show them love and hope that they get to the point that they never see that revenge coming to them. We know what the penalty of sin is, and it's death. We don't wish that for anyone, let alone anyone in our own families. We shouldn't wish that on anyone in our own family, our church family. We can't play God, or his wrath may be redirected at us. True fellowship means not being spiteful towards one another. And we're on to number 6. We need to empathize with one another. This comes from verse 15. It says, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn." I know the answer. I know he's done this before, but have you ever hit your thumb with a hammer? Your thumb isn't the only thing that hurts. Your whole body hurts. Your whole body feels the pain. If one part of the body is suffering, the whole body suffers. If one part of our body is suffering, our whole body is suffering. We need to rejoice and celebrate with those who rejoice in the congregation when something great happens. Weddings, a new birth in the family, a promotion at work. Maybe they just were welcomed into the family of God. Maybe they got a raise at work. Maybe they found a heads-up penny on the ground. When they rejoice, we need to rejoice with them. No matter how big, no matter how small, we need to rejoice with them and be a part of it, just like a family would. With that being said, when they're mourning, we need to mourn with them. We need to let them know that we're there for them. We feel their pain. Sincerely, not superficially. With compassion, and not with sympathy, but empathy. There's a difference there. When someone is hurting or struggling, they don't need instruction on how to get better or downplaying the seriousness of the situation. Men are really guilty of this. We just want to fix things. And I know some women that want to fix things too. But we can't fix the pain or the rejoicing. We can't fix the mourning. We need to be there with them. We need to have that empathy. That empathy is something that makes us as Christians different. It means we feel what they're feeling. It's not, oh, I feel sorry for you. It's we feel sorry in our hearts. Do we have that difference as Christians? Do we have that attitude towards people out in the world, but towards people here, that I feel sorry for you? Or I feel sorry with you? Or I feel the pain with you? We need to have that empathy. We need to take it that step further to feel what the other ones are feeling. And that goes the other way. When we're down, but others are rejoicing and have a need to rejoice, just because we're down doesn't mean we need to drag everyone down with us. We need to open our hearts and let others uplift us too. We can't close our hearts off to others in the family. What people need when they are hurting is they need someone to come alongside them and be with them and let them know that we hurt with them. We don't have to understand their situation. We just have to care. Robert Schuller once said, "Love is my decision to make your problem my problem." Love is my decision to make your problem my problem. True fellowship means we need to empathize with one another. Number 7 is we need to get along with one another. This comes from verse 16 and 18. Live in harmony with one another. Have the same attitude towards one another. Be of the same mind towards one another. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Not everyone, but one, everyone. As much as others will allow, pursue peace. Peace is not absence of conflict. Peace is not absence through conflict. It's not avoiding the conflict. It's acceptance through the conflict. It's agreeing to disagree. It's contentment. How many times in families do you just have to step back and say, I agree to disagree? Chris and I have those talks all the time. We agree to disagree. Remember growing up, my parents would always say, we're not arguing, we're just disagreeing. We need to be content with it and not resent the other person for not having our point of view. Rodney King, during the LA riots, why can't we just get along? Why can't we, especially in the church, just get along? He was seeing at that time the worst of the people in the church. The worst came out. In times of conflict here, in times of conflict in politics, in times of conflict in our community, the worst of us is going to come out. As the church, why should that come out of us? We need to be careful of what comes out and what other people's view is of our family. We don't need to live by it and worry about what others think. But we need to know that they are seeing God through us. We are the window that they see God through. When we come in fellowship, that's where we really know we come and see God. Wayne Brower, in his article in Leadership, says, the German philosopher who compared the human race to a bunch of porcupines huddling together on a cold winter's night. He said, the colder it gets out, the more we huddle together for warmth. But the closer we get to one another, the more we hurt one another with our sharp quills. And in the lonely night of Earth's winter, eventually we begin to drift apart and wander out on our own and freeze to death in our loneliness. Christ has given us an alternative to forgive one another for the pokes and pricks that we receive. It allows us to stay together to be warm. We're going to have those pokes when we get together. There's going to be things we disagree about. There's going to be things that kind of bug us about somebody else. But just like a family, you didn't choose them, but they're there. They're your family. God has given us a way to get around those things. The bigger picture, the bigger purpose. Because of God's sacrifice, He's allowed us to stay together, to stay warm. When we go apart, we die. We burn out. We lose that fervor, that boiling of the Spirit that we were talking about earlier. We lose that when we separate and go apart. When we come together is where the warmth comes. And Christ allows us to have that bond through the thick and through the thin, to be able to stay together and stay on fire for Him. And as I just alluded to, it was Mike Warren that once said, you can pick your friends, but you're stuck with family. True fellowship means getting along with one another. And the eighth, so we're getting here down to the end, as I'll be as typical pastors will say, in conclusion, still a little bit more to go, be humble towards one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. That means take off together. Run with people of low position. Do not be conceited. Do not be wise. This is similar to honoring one another, but goes even further. Be willing to get dirty now and then. Be willing to do menial work. There was a story that I was reading that came up in my class that I was talking about this week. And it was kind of interesting. Church was holding interviews for the new pastor to come in. And this one pastor came in and said, and they didn't say, the church asked him, would you be willing to clean our toilets once a week? Clean our bathrooms once a week? The pastor kind of looked quizzically at him and said, well, yes. Ironically, I'm a janitor as my other job. So he was willing to do that menial work at the church. And eventually, through many other conversations, they appointed him as the pastor of their church. And one joked with him a little bit earlier, and this wasn't the only reason that the other ones didn't pass, but yeah, you were the fourth pastor that came to us, and you were the first pastor to have the response of, yes, I feel I can clean the toilets for you. Now, that wasn't, like I said, the only thing that made them choose that pastor, but the reason they actually seriously asked that in the interview was they didn't want someone to lead the church that was too proud to do the menial work. Because they knew that as a family, we're all called to do the menial work